Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm doing a quick video on the labor market and job quality. This is another area that you get quick hits from the NDP and the Liberal Party in terms of that Stephen Harper's done a poor job on the labor market and the overall employment market. It's another way to show some negativity towards the ruling government versus really relying on facts. So this presentation is only a few slides to highlight the main areas that I'm going to basically walk you through. Because as I said, you're going to hear the different rhetoric. Let's talk about the labor market. The labor market has many facets to the labor market. If you're going to drive labor market, it's going to be driven by consumer spending. It's going to be driven by exports, because those are the critical things that drive the GDP, which drive employment. So in essence, basically the statement has been made by Mulcair and Trudeau that we have precarious jobs. Now let's think of those jobs in general. Part of those precarious jobs stem from bad provincial policy. If you look at the example, green technology, which is being pushed by Mulcair and Justin Trudeau, in Ontario's case, a lot of the jobs that have been created have been temporary or jobs to do with installer to do with green technology. Well, once you install a project and get it up and running, you basically move on, or there's no other projects. So that's why you've got temporary jobs. The other thing too has happened as well is through the FIT process or project or FIT program, and the government of Ontario has actually bled 300,000 manufacturing jobs. These manufacturing jobs are good paying jobs, and what have we replaced them with? More the service sector, as well as some other aspects in terms of professional jobs. Now, if you look at manufacturing jobs in general, we've picked some of it up and some of that's gone through automation. You're always going to hear them put the spin that it's all service sector, but this particular slide actually shows you that of the 22,000 jobs, were full-time jobs. Okay, so when I looked at the job trends, 86% of the jobs created since 2010 have been full-time jobs. And if you look at the areas, on combination of food services with 98K, which is basically the areas that the NDT focuses on, but look at where you're seeing the other areas: professional jobs, construction, healthcare. Typically those jobs pay a lot more than minimum wage, but they're not being talked about. Why? Because the NDP can't run on a platform where the actual breakdown of the facts, because it actually would muddy their water in terms of their statements. Let's talk about provincial policies. Okay, a lot of the labor policies drive from what the government decides to do in terms of setting its priority. If the government decides that I'm going to move forward with certain policies, whether it's FIT, whether it's full-day kindergarten, it's going to drive different things in terms of the private sector, in terms of how investment's going to operate. In Ontario's particular case, they feel that the private sector is like their own instant teller machine, and therefore they basically imposing more and more policies like Ontario Registered Pension Plan, cap and trade, or other red tape to basically almost justify creating more public sector jobs, which then relates to the gaps between private and public sector, because in Ontario's case they've grown public sector jobs at a quicker pace than they've grown private sector jobs, and that's something to bear in mind when you're talking in the election. Yes, it's a provincial issue, but it does drive the overall labor numbers. Let's talk about the Canadian middle class. This is a statement that you constantly hear, that Harper has not helped the middle class. Well, that's not necessarily true. Harper's policies at the federal level have supported basically the middle class. The middle class now on a per capita basis is better in the US. And the reason I bring that up is there's a constant comparison between Obama and Harper. Now basically Obama is more linked to Mulcair in terms of basically policies, and that's because Obama uses Keynesian economics in a quick 10-second statement. That's basically government intervention into the economy, and that seems to be the overall theme you're going to get from the NDP and Liberal government. Harper believes more right balance of policies to create taxation flow, whether that's reducing GST for consumption to help with consumer spending, or focusing on corporate tax to try to push more investment into Canada to support exports and trade. Now, you're never going to hear those statements from Justin Trudeau or Mulcair, because they can't win on those type of policy statement. But what they can try to do is paint the picture that the middle class is struggling. It isn't at the federal level. For example, what Harper does at the federal level 85% of that's taken back by provincial policies. Now you're going to say, well, part of those potential policies at the provincial level are driven by cuts to transfers. Well, Harper has grown the transfers and the redistribution of wealth quite well. And if you want to compare it, go take a look at the U.S. and see how they redistribute the wealth. The bounty of the U.S. goes to more the top 10% of their population than in case of Canada. We've done a very good job of sharing the wealth through transfers, and that transfers is the health and social transfers, or health as well as infrastructure money. We've basically transferred that. We've taken that tax dollars and transferred it better. We are up there in terms of the way we are with Scandinavia in terms of our growth targets. Now you're also going to hear Scandinavia talked about. Well, the thing is Scandinavia in general has higher cost of living there. So yes, they pay for it there, but they basically have no incentives for people to advance. Now you need to be very careful when you look at policies, because a lot of cases some government policies are more on consumption tax based, so their consumer spending is up, versus basically income tax. So when you look at things, I think you need to look at the grander scheme of what exists in those countries and how they compare. The other thing that you need to bear in mind too as well is Canada is connected to the US, therefore it has to be cost competitive in terms of its tax base to what happens in the US. Let's talk about job quality. This is a big announcement in terms of what's happening in job quality. The biggest thing that's been a push since the 80s is people should go to school and get a degree, which is fine. But that degree nowadays is kind of meaningless unless it's aligned with opportunities. Since the 90s, we've seen technological advancements happen in areas like automation. So for example, in the accounting profession, we've seen more and more automation where accounts payable, accounts receivable jobs are no longer in existence because we've automated that process. We've taken away some of the manufacturing processes through robotic and laser welding. We've also brought in analytics research to kind of take that brain power and kind of pull things together and using computer technology. Retailers, we've gone to more online deals. Canada's been slow to adopt, but they're growing more to that. And then you're actually seeing other areas like emails, reduced Canada Post. You've seen different things like self-service sectors where you're going into kiosk. So a lot of cases we've got automation. That's never discussed in any job quality survey. It's just overall top level knowledge, because it's the way the NDP can do is take the negativity and push it down. Let's talk about skills gap. This is a big issue in terms of moving forward between the skilled trades or any sort of industry that we need to support advanced manufacturing, mining, resources. Students have decided through the educational system to basically choose degree paths. Now this is where the education system is failing. If you truly want to help people, then you truly need to get together with education. I mean the school systems, you need to get with business, you also need to get with the private sector, and to kind of realign kids and push them to careers where there are opportunities. You will not hear that from Mulcair and Justin Trudeau, because it's easy just to blame Harper's responsible for all that. And yet if you go look at that, creating more opening in spaces at university colleges only creates false hope sometimes, and we need to kind of take a step back and realign our education system to make sure that we're aligning it where their skill gaps are. So that being said, you need to ask those questions to Mulcair and to Justin Trudeau on how they would improve that. The last area I want to focus on is the temporary foreign work program. This one came into play because two reasons why. We were running into skills gaps issues where we needed engineers and different people to support it. Now that being said, there has been some abuse, and that's what you hear more and more. But over the year, since last year when they brought in the proposed changes, the government's got tougher, and they've gotten really more to push towards a Canadian solution, which means that Canadians should be considered for jobs first before companies file for the need for temporary foreign workers. There's also things being more procedural put into, more audits, and more companies have to do the justification and will be monitored more closely to make sure there's no abuse. Now that stuff is not really discussed. Is there more that is discussed by the NDP or Liberal Party? No. What you need to do is keep pushing to these guys and say, well, if you don't like Harper's program for temporary foreign workers, what is your choice? And it doesn't seem to be any discussion from the NDP or the Liberal Party related to that. So that's things you need to ask. This presentation was a quick presentation to kind of give you an overview of the labor market, to kind of put some of that fallacy or lack of factual information coming from the Liberal Party and the NDP related to policies.